Two souls love you, but one carries a secret so profound it has the power to reshape everything you thought you understood about love, about men, and about the invisible forces that draw certain people into your orbit. You feel it already, don't you? You don't need proof written in black and white. You don't need a confession extracted through confrontation or a late-night admission soaked in vulnerability. Your body has already received the information. Your intuition has been speaking in the quiet moments between breaths, in the stillness that settles over you just before sleep, in the subtle tightening across your chest when his name surfaces unexpectedly in your thoughts. Something in you has always known that what is happening beneath the surface of this situation is far more layered than what appears in daylight. Two souls love you. One loves you in the light. The other loves you in the dark, and that darkness is not wickedness. It is depth. It is the kind of love that lives below language, below conscious understanding, in the primal architecture of a man who has never been asked to confront himself, the way you, simply by existing, ask him to. The first love feels steady, almost predictable in the most reassuring sense of that word. It shows up in consistent gestures, in warmth that does not waver with shifting moods, in the kind of reliability that doesn't demand explanation because it simply is. This love admires you openly. It wants to build something tangible with you, to plan, to claim you not out of possession, but out of genuine devotion. It sees your softness and wants to shelter it. It sees your fire and chooses to stand beside it rather than recoil from it. This love feels safe because it is conscious. The man who carries it knows what he feels, has made peace with feeling it, and is not frightened by the knowing. He wears his affection for you without armor. But the second soul is an altogether different matter. The second soul loves you in a way that frightens even him. And that fear is not weakness. It is the natural response of someone who has spent years carefully constructing a version of himself that keeps the most vulnerable parts buried and protected, only to have that entire architecture quietly destabilized by the simple fact of your presence. His secret is not betrayal. He has not chosen someone else. He has not constructed a hidden life behind your back. His secret is far more significant than infidelity, and far harder to confess, even to himself, because it lives not in action, but in the interior world he has spent years refusing to visit. His secret is that loving you has awakened parts of him he sealed away long before you arrived. When he first encountered you, something ancient stirred in the deepest register of his being. Not simply attraction in the conventional sense, not the ordinary pull of chemistry or aesthetic appreciation, but recognition. You mirrored something back to him that he had never permitted himself to see clearly. You reflected both his highest potential and his most carefully concealed wounds in the same glance. Often without trying, often without even being aware of what you were doing. Being near you was never just romance. It was confrontation. And most people, regardless of how drawn they are to their mirror, do not fall into it without trembling. You carry a frequency that exposes, not intentionally, not cruelly, but naturally. The way sunlight exposes what shadow conceals simply by arriving. When you stand in your authenticity, when you speak your truth without editing it for comfort, when you love generously without shrinking your own dimensions to make space for someone else's discomfort, you activate the unconscious in those who come close enough to feel your presence. The first soul feels inspired by that activation. He rises to meet it with curiosity and willingness. The second soul feels undone by it. And the distinction between those two responses tells you almost everything. His shocking secret then is this: loving you forces him to meet himself. You represent the part of him that longs to feel without apology, to surrender without interpreting surrender as defeat, to soften without reading softness as dangerous exposure. You awaken the buried tenderness in him, the tenderness that was disciplined out of him through years of being taught that emotional availability was a liability, that vulnerability was an invitation for harm, that the feeling man was a lesser man. You stir his unprocessed grief, his deferred dreams, the versions of himself he quietly abandoned in order to become acceptable and functional by the world's narrow standards. And when those submerged parts begin to rise in your presence, they do not surface gently, with manners and timing. They arrive demanding acknowledgement. They roar. He loves you. That part is not in question. But loving you dismantles him. And dismantling is not a comfortable experience, even when it is necessary. He finds himself thinking of you not only with longing and desire, but with a fear that confuses him, because he was not supposed to be afraid of love. He was supposed to be in control of it. He fears not being enough for someone who sees as clearly as you see. He fears being witnessed too completely, too accurately, with no flattering filters. He fears that if you looked into the center of him, past the strength he performs, past the competence he displays, past the carefully maintained composure, you would find the contradictions he hides from the world, and, more painfully, from himself. Because you already do see. That is the unspoken tension living between you, like electricity in the air before a storm. You see the golden capacities in him, the leadership, the vision, the quiet protectiveness. And you also see the frightened boy underneath all of that construction. The boy who learned early that his heart was a liability. The boy who equated emotional openness with danger. Because in some earlier chapter of his life, that equation was accurate enough to believe. The boy who mistook distance for dignity, and called avoidance by the more respectable name of self-control. He feels that you see it, and being seen without armor is terrifying to someone whose entire sense of safety depends on remaining opaque. This is the true reason his love arrives in waves, rather than in steady, continuous warmth. This is why he draws close with unmistakable intensity and then retreats without apparent cause. Why he speaks of futures with you and then retreats into silence. Why he is certain one day and questioning everything the next. It is not inconstancy of feeling. He is not a man whose affections are shallow or unstable at their root. What is unstable is his identity when placed in proximity to you. He is experiencing the collision between who he has spent years pretending to be and who he senses he could actually become. And that collision is loud, disorienting, and not entirely within his conscious control. Being with you, or even the serious contemplation of being with you, forces him into what might be understood as a psychological death. The old identity, the one constructed on ego management, emotional avoidance, strategic distance, and the particular performance of strength that has nothing to do with actual wholeness, cannot survive in sustained contact with your emotional depth. You ask nothing of him verbally. You issue no ultimatums. You make no explicit demands for his transformation. And yet your presence alone functions as an invitation he doesn't quite know how to answer. Because answering it honestly would require him to become someone he has not yet allowed himself to be. He feels stripped in your company, exposed in a way that goes beyond the physical, revealed to himself through the mirror of you. And here is the part that lives beneath even that. Part of him resents you for it, and carries quiet guilt about that resentment, because he is intelligent enough to understand that you have done nothing wrong. Awakening does not arrive like a gentle dawn. It arrives like the cracking open of something sealed, with all the noise and shock that implies. When buried pain is disturbed, it does not re-emerge as something polished and manageable. It roars. When suppressed longing wakes from years of enforced sleep, it shakes the foundations of the life built over it. You cracked open compartments in him that he had closed deliberately, that he had decided were best left undisturbed, that he had convinced himself were no longer relevant. He thought he was functioning. He thought the architecture of his life was stable and sufficient. He thought he knew himself. Then you arrived, and suddenly he found himself dreaming differently, thinking differently, questioning the choices, the patterns, the identities he had accepted as permanent. You are not simply a romantic interest to him. You are a psychological catalyst. You are the thing that happened to him that divided his inner life into before and after. You, meanwhile, embody integration naturally, and this is not accidental. You feel deeply and still stand upright. You nurture without surrendering your own necessities. You love without dissolving the architecture of yourself into whoever you are loving. You have already walked through your own inner wilderness, through the abandonment wounds, the longing to finally be chosen and held without conditions, the grief of love that arrived incomplete, the fear that your depth might be too much for anyone willing to stay. You sat with those things. You cried through them without letting them harden you. You alchemized them into the particular kind of sovereign softness that now makes you so confronting to someone who has not yet done that work. He has not. And so when he loves you, he loves your light with one hand and flinches from the way your light falls on his unexamined darkness with the other. One day he is certain of you, magnetized, moving toward you with the confidence of a man who knows what he wants. The next day he is distant, inaccessible, rearranged behind a wall you cannot see him building in real time. It is not instability of affection. It is instability of self. You threaten the mask. And masks, regardless of how much they cost the person wearing them, fight to survive. His secret is not that he loves someone else. His secret is that he loves you more deeply than he currently feels capable of handling. That he senses if he chooses you with his whole self, not just the composed and competent surface, but all of it. He cannot continue to be half-evolved. He cannot keep numbing. He cannot maintain the comfortable distance from his own interior life that has served as his primary coping mechanism. Loving you fully demands emotional, spiritual, and psychological maturity. And that is terrifying to a man whose sense of safety has been built entirely around the avoidance of those exact demands. But you must understand clearly, you are not responsible for his integration. That work belongs to him alone. You are not meant to make yourself smaller, quieter, or less true so that your depth feels less confronting to someone who hasn't yet learned to swim in deep water. The first soul may meet you exactly where you are. The second soul must rise to meet you. That distinction matters enormously. The universe does not bring two souls into your atmosphere without purpose. One arrives to show you what steady, conscious love feels like. Love that soothes the nervous system and builds rather than unsettles. The other arrives to show you what transformative love looks like when it is chosen deliberately. When someone decides that the discomfort of becoming is worth the arrival at wholeness. One is not more valuable than the other in the abstract, but only one carries the secret that, if properly understood and acted upon with courage, could produce something genuinely rare. Not fantasy, not chaos, but a union forged in the fire of mutual self-confrontation. If the second soul chooses courage over comfort, if he steps into self-awareness rather than retreating from it, the love between you stabilizes into something anchored. His pursuit no longer oscillates. His presence no longer alternates between thunder and silence. He becomes a man capable of meeting you without flinching from what your presence reveals, because he has done the work of no longer fearing his own reflection. But until that moment arrives, his love remains what it is: powerful, loud, electric, and deeply uncertain of itself. You must decide what your spirit is prepared to hold, and for how long. And there is no wrong answer to that question. Know only this: the shocking secret was never meant to wound you. It was always meant to reveal the deeper mechanics of connection. That attraction is rarely about surface compatibility, but about unconscious recognition. About being drawn irresistibly toward the one whose missing pieces mirror your own. He is still deciding whether loving you will break his ego or build his soul. You, already sovereign, already whole, already radiant in your integration, are not waiting to be chosen. You are the axis around which the choosing happens. And the one who can meet you without trembling will not hesitate.